This is a small intuition about time and our comprehension of time. So there is a common understanding that time is somehow a dimension, and when we speak of space-time, we combine the three dimensions of space into one that we call space, and then we give it a relationship to time. So it's almost like grouping our known physical dimensions so that we can interrelate them with the time, and that allows us to keep the forms that we have in 3 dimension pretty much stable to our understanding, so that a cube can remain a cube and a rectangle can remain a rectangle, a pyramid can remain a pyramid. And if we didn't interlock with height and length, if we don't interlock them and then we put them in relationship to time, then the cube and any other 3D form will be distorted and sometimes hard for us to comprehend and manipulate, intellectually speaking and also physically speaking. So we interlock the 3 dimensions into one space dimension, and then we interrelate it in with the other dimension, which is time. Now, I feel like time is also somehow a measurement of our ability to comprehend the universe, in the meaning that the more we go into a level of granularity of time, and the more we access information. So what is contained in a happening of 1 second today, we can measure it and find so much information that maybe 50 years or 100 years ago we couldn't penetrate the knowledge that we're expressing in our world or universe, but was expressing too fast or at a frequency which was not visible not only to the human eye but our technology and our tools. So the granularity of time, somehow the more we can measure precisely smaller fractions of time, and the vaster our knowledge goes. But it's not about only conceiving time in the most granular possible way, but it's also about being able to observe, to screenshot context and interpositions of elements at very small space frames, so that we can then compare them, analyze them, or whatever. So it's also about being able to record, analyze, and comprehend the tiniest fractions of time. And somehow what the scientists in CERN in Geneva are trying to do by colliding particles of matter against each other on I don't know, a 30 or 40 kilometers, I don't remember how much is the diameter of the accelerator of particles. So doing such experiments is almost like trying to comprehend time, space, and matter inside the time-space box, because we like already guide through our minds and through the conception of the accelerator itself. We already kind of made a circular tunnel, so that we can remain observers of the whole loop. So we constrain the universe, and we try to concentrate it or observe it within a small circle, a small 3-dimensional circle or tube that we have conceived, but how it works is beyond that. So we can our results that we measure are altered by our vision or our level of expectation. So in a way, a more out of the box way of testing the acceleration of particles would be to open up the tunnel, and instead of creating a loop, within a physical space that we can observe and comprehend, but trying to open up that loop to the whole universe, meaning that like the shooting part of the accelerator would be diametric in 3 dimensions, diametrically opposed to the receptor, to the screen that is supposed to receive and measure the impacts. So meaning that, I don't know, from the North Pole you shoot a beam of matter straight into an unknown place of the universe, but in a direction opposite to your reader, which is in the South Pole, perfectly diametrically opposite. Or shooting even 2 beams, one from the North Pole, one from the South Pole, into the exact opposite direction in the 3-dimensional realm that we can control. And not only we could do that in terms of space positions, but also in terms of synchronizing the signals. So like at the highest level of granular time that we can do, shooting and recording, and then recording with a buffer zone, meaning being able to record few seconds before the beam and few seconds after the beam, because we cannot expect that the result will only occur in a sequential way, meaning that we shoot a beam and we expect it to always arrive a little bit later than when we shot it, because doing so we are already closing our minds to whatever could happen in reality. So an experiment with time could maybe bring a better understanding if we could shoot it in that way. And again, this is because time is somehow a consequence of our existence in space, and also a building block, a cement of our existence in space-time. Meaning that if we were to exist just in a geolocation way, which are the 3 dimensions that we have to locate ourselves according to a referential, without time, then we cannot even navigate those 3 dimensions. And also, for a movement to happen within those 3 dimensions, a certain amount of energy needs to be spent, so that things, when they add up at the level of the universe, of the cosmos, that they can find balance. That nothing has moved without creating a trail or a compensation in other parts of the universe. And to be able to register movements and to somehow acknowledge them, so that anything that moves from one spot to another be acknowledged in, let's say, we could say, the blueprint of the universe, beyond what we can observe, then it has to have a form of energy or a form of traction that flatten everything according to our time and our space. And so that's how gravity is somehow mathematically interacting with our realm, so that a movement can seem to start from an immobile position, or there is always a reference, a geolocation reference, to which whatever object we throw into the air, according to the Newton law, that eventually it's gonna come back to a point of collision with another pseudo-static surface, like the surface of Earth or whatever, can hold us from being attracted further down, so it can be the level of the ocean. So this is how the gravity is mathematically putting a zero base to our time space. Otherwise, if we didn't have gravity for at least a certain phase in human knowledge, without gravity, then we would not be able to understand space movements or space travel, or even relationship to another gravity point or gravity center, or whatever it is that will also put us that will also need to format us into a space-time referential from where we can see ourselves moving or evolving, whether front in time or back in time, front in space or back in space. So that's a little bit about this intuition, about the importance of time or its coexistence and relationship with space and us as a being, and as a consequence the function of somehow gravity, at least from the perspective of an Earth-based observation of the universe, because again, nothing is true in absoluteness, especially in the human mind. It's always a modelization of the universe from the perspective of ourself and how we perceive ourselves in position to the universe, and that's a little bit what I'm trying to mean. And of course, this is just intuition, and I'm not aware very in depth of all the mathematical things and research and that is being done. So it's based on a little bit of that understanding of what we read about quantum mechanics and a lot about intuition. Thank you. Now about time and how we experience it, or how we use it to orient ourselves in a realm of existence is that we somehow apply a timestamp to every memory, and our very ability to create a memory is what serves us as a compass as to where we are in time, or to comfort us that time is going in a sequential way, because I can remember that this memory, it was from yesterday and not tomorrow, or it was from a year back or not yesterday, and so on. So memories also, of course, come also with some intuitive context with the memory, some information, like when you look at a photo of New York City in the 18th century, there are elements there that acts as a timestamp, how people dress and the kind of vehicles they have and so on, but that seems pretty clear. But if, for instance, we would see a photo of New York City from what looks like a future time, and if we don't have a timestamp to measure it, we actually cannot tell if this was 10,000 years ahead, or if it was maybe 50,000 years ago. On the Manhattan Island, some form of development happened and somehow disappeared, or even 1,000,000 years ago. We are actually not able to differentiate between a photo that would come from the very far past or the very far future, unless we can read its time signature, its time stamp, and we can position it according to our time, our current, what we call our current time. And for us to be able to measure time, even if our understanding of time for now is very limited, because we experience time in a one-way direction and in a sequential direction for which we have created a measurement unit, which we call seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, and centuries, millennia, and so on. This is how we apply a ruler over time to guide ourselves, but our ruler is only extending into one direction for now. And we somehow need to calibrate our measurement of time, because in nature time is very hard for the human mind to wrap around our mind. If we sit somewhere and we don't have any references as to the day that passes and the night that passes, so if we are in an enclosure which is cutting us off from nature and from other people, then we lose the notion of time and how fast or how slow it is evolving. So we have, as humans, of course, it's very disturbing for us if we cannot measure things. So if we cannot measure things, then we feel that we cannot control them, and if we cannot control our immediate future, then we're somehow in a panic mode. So we use some of the elements of nature. Some tricks that nature is using to also synchronize itself with its own cycles. And for example, it's very common knowledge, maybe, that almost all our watches and computers or whatever time recording machines are somehow synchronizing with a stone or quartz, which is an inert material, but when excited or when behaving itself with nature, it just uses a specific duration of time, which is its heartbeat, and what we came to measure in hertz or whatever, second, millisecond, is a natural vibration rhythm that some elements have. And I mean, the one that we have chosen to align with is quartz, but certainly probably there are some other elements that could vibrate and guide us in terms of measuring time, but on another scale, and that's another discussion. So we could just focus on the second and how our world has evolved around the notion of a second as the smallest everyday comprehensible granular measurement of time. And in a second, things happens in 1 second, and those things that happen in 1 second are enough for us to deal with our evolution in time and our remembering of the immediate past and the very near future. For example, it is in the second, or maybe a little bit more than a second or a little bit less than a second, that our spectrum measurements, the body we have, the eyes and the brain, we can see in time in a spectrum of a few milliseconds or a second in future. We can see, we don't realize it, but every day we're making decisions based on an immediate knowledge of the immediate future that may happen, and we intuitively guess it from the context, from readings that we pick up. Like when you're about to cross a street, you sometimes unconsciously stop just before the place where the bus would have hit you, and we may say it's luck or God or something. Somebody called you and you heard something, but technically speaking, our brain is capable of making some extrapolation on instant readings and somehow calculate collisions or happenings or behaviors within our immediate time space environment. And we have the same ability to not only read, recognize, but also modify our action in this small spectrum of time. So like what we call reflexes are things that we cannot comprehend with our brain, but are movements and adaptations that our body may take in a very short, may decide to take in a very short period of time. because it reacted to a stimulus from the environment. So the same capacity that we have to have a reflex in the very near future, we somehow also have it to modify the very near past. So we dream of coming back in past to change our lives, but we dream that on a very long time. Like, I wish I could come back yesterday or a year before to change this and that, but actually we forget that we can just change the second that has just passed. And there is tremendous power and tremendous reorganization of the universe when if we can make it conscious to us, our capacity to amend time space in the immediate past and the immediate future, that is for now the realm or the spectrum that we can, with our body and machines, comprehend. So that's about our dealing with time, and we now carry smart watches, and some people have heart pacemakers. So we are already using digital technology and the quartz and whatever microprocessor time clock base that is there to help us, to help our body and to help our mind to synchronize and realign and keep in this smooth evolution of time. That at the same time, this extension of our own senses in terms of time measurement using technology is also an opportunity for us to take a little bit more responsibility for our actions in so-called time evolution. And if we can just get this into our conscious mind and act accordingly, it may change our perspectives of even who we are and what we do and why we do it, and then how much we are responsible for our own kind of destiny, recalculated or calculated destiny. One of the easiest way to comprehend time for us is as a geo position, as a GPS location dimension. So, I mean, very commonly with our friends, we want to have a meeting. So we designate a place which has the three-dimensional coordinate. So when you say TGI Friday in that place, then you have a three-dimensional coordinate on the planet Earth, even though if it's at the end of your street. Nevertheless, it is a three-dimensional coordinate. And then if I go now or if I go tomorrow and you're not there, then it's not an appointment. We're missing a coordinate. So we have another coordinate, a geo coordinate, which is time. So we will meet at TGI Friday on Friday at 4 p.m. of this month and this year. And that is easier for us to comprehend because we use it every day. We use time as a coordinate. And that's one thing about a time in relation to our memories and the projection of our happening. So when, for example, you project the thinking that you're going to meet with your friend at that certain moment in time and at that certain place, you also pay. Somehow you pay for that booking. You booking a time space in advance, and I mean, not pay in a bad or good way. It's just a mechanical thing in the universe that you book a time space coordinate in the universe and you append to it an emotional energy. So you're happy that you're gonna meet your friend on that moment, or you're unhappy that you're going, I don't know, you're called to a police interview or a court, you're in a court or whatever. So you're summoning that moment with fear or joy or anything, and that's how we mark, and we mark an appointment, a 4-dimensional appointment in the map of the universe, so that we can interact with each others. So that's a little bit one simple way of understanding our digesting of time. And so we use time in a very natural and basic way in our everyday life, but once we can comprehend time at a more granular level, and how we are creating time and time is creating us, then there are things that humans may have called magic in the past, but which is today comprehensible for us, because we can use the technology to explain it and excuse the things that we do not understand. So, for instance, because today we have camera recorders that can record a lot of frames per second. So it allows us to have funny slow motion movies and stuff, or on the other side, accelerating the movement of a glacier that could take 10 years and observe that movement in a couple of seconds. So our ability to record and play time according to a certain convenience for us gives us access to a very interesting knowledge. But also being able to understand how much presence what we call matter must have in a specific time space to appear real for a human, that also we can start to understand it better. So, for example, when we have technology like virtual reality, and then you put the helmet, and you understand that if you record 2 scenes in a real life with a 360 degrees camera, and if you record at a high enough resolution and at a high enough frame rate, so let's say you can record at 120 FPS per second, frames per second, and you record at 22K, you need more FPS, but you get the meaning if you calculate correctly the relationship between resolution and FPS so that it appears real. So if, let's say, you reach that threshold of realness, and then you double that threshold. So if you double that threshold, you could create an experience in 360 degrees and 3-dimensional with multi-directional sound as well. And you could have 2 persons, like you could see 2 of me having 2 different discussions with you, meaning that I could be on the left side of you talking about something, and then I could be on your right side talking about something else at the same time. In the past, we could not imagine that is possible, but given the frame per second knowledge that we have now, and the resolution, and the fact that you can project information to a human being so fast that you could mechanically move that fast between 2 different positions, and if you could consciously entertain 2 different discussions in 2 different places at the same time, and that becomes possible. If you can comprehend that, as long as in one place a version of me is behaving, is projecting fast enough light and sound emanating from my position and my discussion in that specific place, let's say on your left side, as long as I respect that rule, I have plenty of time to move around and be in another place and express myself and discuss with somebody else at the same time as I'm entertaining a discussion with you about different subject. And so somehow it can help us understand better the scriptures, some of the old scriptures, and be it the Bible, the Quran, Torah, or Upanishads, or any other mythological occurrences of some people, humans, or sometimes we give them, because those humans at that time could not comprehend that happening, so they may have given them divine character, or I don't know, magic, or whatever, alien, whatever form of trying to make this reasonably acceptable to the human mind. So whatever things were recorded in the past and come to us as songs, as scripture, as stories, are actually just physically possible. It's all about this capacity to create an experience which is somehow palpable to the human being. That if the human being and his tools, they zoom into that presence, they can find enough frames per second and enough materialistic occurrence in a given granularity of time that it appears real. But not only it appears real, it appears like exclusively happening in front of us at that very time-space moment. And this is a little bit what we are capable now of understanding, that there is no exclusivity as such in the universe, and that one can be at different places at the same time without breaking the rules of whatever rules we have, speed of light and golden ratios and any constants that we may use, or any mathematical formula that we may use. We don't even need to distort them. We just need to understand that we could project that fast, or we could be and travel that fast, that we could be at two places at the same time. And if the brain can follow, we could entertain two existences out of the same body of matter. We could entertain two lives, so-called lives, or two occurrences of one single soul or self. Again, about our comprehension of time, and another way that we deal with it or we use it is actually within our own cells and our body. Everything in our body is geared to react according to a specific time scale and a specific evolution in time, meaning that some glands may secrete a given hormone at a specific time and then stop and then maybe resume at a different age, or some hormones may just start being present in our body after a certain age, just as in opposition as those hormones that are kicked off at our birth, and which will guide our growth, the growth of our body. Some hormones and some proteins and other amino acids will regulate our decay, and in that growing up and growing down of our physiology, there is the wisdom of a clock. There is the wisdom of our body reminding us and recalling us to a specific timeline and helping us not to get lost. So if let's say, for instance, I was saying earlier, if you're put in a room disconnected from the environment and any social interaction, you may not know if 10 years passed or if 1 year passed. But if you have a mirror and you look at yourself, you may guess how many years have passed, just based on the information you get from your own skin, or your hair, or your eyes and your voice. So that's how the body is also a machine, a time measurement machine, and a time manipulation machine, because not only we have tools to measure, but as soon as you have a tool to measure, then you have a tool to impact, you have a tool to react. And also we have almost all our existence is based on some cyclical time loops, starting from the heartbeat. Is almost like the quartz of our human body, and so it's the equivalent of a quartz for a watch. Could be our heartbeat rhythm, or our breathing rhythm, or the rhythm of whatever physiological mechanism that is happening in a cyclical movement, including, for instance, digestion. So we normally would put food in our stomach at specific times, which in the past would be when before we go to sleep, or in the morning when we wake up with the breakfast. So the breakfast is not only a feeding mechanism, but also a clock, a time realignment, a time realignment activity, so that our body can physiologically wake up and be ready for a daytime activity. So it is also time that makes us healthy or not, and how we relate to time, especially our cells, is very important. And what we call cancer, in a certain way, is a time anomaly for a certain group of cells. And these cells, just like the overall body to which they belong, each cell is bound by its individual cycle of reproduction, and then all the cells of that specific organ or function that is to be operated in our body, all that group of cells have a calendar as a group. They have a calendar, a rhythm, an appointment in time, which they are supposed to respect. In one way, we are starting to be able to read that calendar from the DNA decoding, and in another way, we are also observing the damage that happens when a cell or a group of cell or a whole organ is behaving in a way that was not described in its time scale, and it's in agenda time speaking. So let's say a lymphatic cell may have a certain individual lifetime of, 10 days, 20 days, whatever it is, after which it's supposed to die, and then give back the elements for a new lymphatic cell that is supposed to take over the job and then die again after a week or 10 days. So this is pretty much the same as our skin cells. They must die, because if they don't die, then our skin will not be able to perform its functions and its role in our body. So lymphatic cancer happens when those specific cells are not dying as quickly as they should at the individual level, but also they're not accelerating or decelerating their growth as a group. So what happens is that when this time anomaly happens, it happens very often in our body that some cells, one or two or whatever, thousands, there is a threshold below which these anomalies or this alignment happens at a cellular individual cell level, but that is somehow manageable by the body. But once there is a synchronization of that anomaly among for instance, I don't know, 10% of the cells of a given organ or a given function, like red cells or lymphatic cells or whatever, white cells, once a certain number are affected by a single anomaly, and then it becomes a thousands anomaly, and then they synchronize over 100,000 or a million of cells, multiplying and not dying at the right time, then we start to have a problem, and we call it cancer. So cancer is our mechanical explanation of the space time that a group of cells is taking in comparison to what they're supposed to take in normal time. So what a cancer, or how we call it, that physical form that we can operate and just get it out of the body when we notice it, we can physically remove it. That's one thing, because that cell has somehow that group of cell, although is multiplying too much and taking so much space and time and resources within the body, but it is still within an envelope, within a membrane, so you could physically remove it, be it in the brain, in the skin, or whatever organ. You could physically remove those groups of cells that have teamed up. They teamed up because just like any surviving organism, you're stronger when you come together if you want to survive. So if you want to survive naturally, you come together, but also if you want to survive in an unnatural way, you even have more reasons to come together. So it could explain that cancerogen cells, they look for each other in some ways to gather resources and also to be able to negotiate or colonize, overcome some interstitial spaces that are between the cells, and they can occupy them. So this is the impact of time disalignment, or time alignment at physiological level, and also, so suddenly you may fight a cancer of something and try any kind of medicine, chemotherapy, laser, whatever, grounding methods, decelerating methods, light, UV, whatever, heat waves, sound waves. We could try to use. I mean, we use many things. We could use many things, from chemical to physical impact, and we are bombarding those group of cells in a way, telling them you're not welcome to expand like this. You have to stop. So we are talking, in a way, we're talking to them. We're talking to those cells. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it may look like they slow down because mechanically or chemically speaking, we have put some pressure on them to constrain them, or we have taken away a very important resource, building block that they may use to multiply, and so naturally they would have to slow down until they can find an alternative of sourcing. But then sometimes, in relation or not to the medicaments or to the prescription that we're trying to do to stop those cells, sometimes by themselves they just suddenly all die. They, for some reason, they reach another thing that we do not yet understand, but they reach like a space-time, location, temperature, acidity level, or whatever is in there in that environment that will trigger a backup kill switch. Sometimes that backup kill switch may happen before the whole body dies, and sometimes, unfortunately, the cancerogen group of cells, they have miscalculated, or they have ignored. Somehow, at a physiological level, they have taken so much pride, arrogance, physiological arrogance as to how much they can occupy while speaking to other cells that we won't hurt the whole organism because it defines our own existence as well. So in a way they get involved, they get absorbed by a physiological over multiplication, pride, and then they may be called or not to their destiny, in a way, to their DNA destiny, called either by the environment or by another parameter which we don't understand yet, which is about an interrelated realm that cannot take that much disruption for any position or any concentration of certain elements in a certain space. So, for example, if suddenly there's so much concentration of iron in a specific place of the human body, but it also means there is an abnormal concentration of iron in a time space, and that iron is not supposed to be, it's supposed to do other jobs in other places, and is somehow recalled into other places where it's supposed to play a role. And this situation is very hard, and it's only an intuitive explanation of why or how some cancer cells may either start to be cancerogen or stop to be cancerogen. So this is just to cut it short. Cancer is very much related to time, and time is very much a building block of cancer type of behavior. Likewise, like some cells become cancer for our own body, we the humans become a cancer for the planet in pretty much the same framework. Different time scale, different space scales, different processes, but we also do the same in the way that we consume resources, and in the way that we consume resources in an unnatural concentration, because we don't consume resources for what we really need for our own body, but we consume resources based on an agenda that is defined by access to finance, access to debt, availability of capital, and what we call legal entities, like we call them corporations, state, whatever it is, that base their return on investment on exponential acceleration and very high concentration of resources, digging and manufacturing, which creates, again, just like in our body, an unusual and unnatural movement of elements from one place to another for a function or another function, as against a blueprint, a natural blueprint toward which the whole Earth or the whole cosmos may call back the elements. Like there is a certain tolerance, a certain getaway that we can benefit from, just like cancer cells may benefit from it during a certain time. But then there is a calling, and either a conscious calling where the cancerogen cells, they say, okay guys, we have to just stop. Yet they never disappear completely, because they still have to exist. Even a virus or what we call a bad bacteria will never just be annihilated or disappear from existence. It will just contract back to either a normal or under normal rate until it's again going to perform something. So like that, our human activities, they don't need to be exterminated, or they don't need to be extrapolated in an exaggerated way, and aligning back to the way the earth, using the rivers and the clouds and using the air and the animals to move around the resources, to move around certain elements and to distribute them into certain places at certain time, So it can be expressed in migratory patterns of fish, sea creatures or flying creatures or earth traveling creatures, and also the plants, the way they evolve under the water, the way they evolve upon earth, or even in the air, some bacterias. They're overall performing a kind of stabilizing job of getting this much of iron and this much of oxygen and carbon into this specific space and a specific time, in order to create a closer match to the blueprint of whatever configuration we were born in. So this was a little bit extrapolating from the impact of time, but it's really it also, time relates to inert forms of things and living forms of things, with or without consciousness. We are all subject to time.